You probably noticed this graph over here, and this graph is called a histogram. But what does it actually do? We know a histogram is basically a graph that shows you the tonal values in your image, from pure black to pure white. But how can you actually use it? Not just when taking photos, but when you're editing. One of the most common mistakes photographers make is overexposing or underexposing their images, and this can lead to lost details in the shadows or blown out highlights. Let's say you're shooting a landscape and you want to capture the details in the shadows as well as the highlights. By checking the histogram, you can adjust the exposure compensation to get the perfect shot. For example, if the histogram shows that the shadows are too dark, you can increase the exposure to bring out those details. By looking at the histogram, you can tell if your photo is too bright or too dark. But to use it effectively, you first need to understand what each part of the graph represents. So today, I'm going to show you how to use the histogram when you're editing and when you're taking photographs. The histogram is not just some random chart. It's an incredible tool broadly used for statistical purposes, not just by photographers, but scientists, engineers, marketing gurus, you name it. What it does is that it organizes data into parts, making it super easy to spot patterns and how everything's distributed. In photography, this data is categorized into 5 different zones: blacks, shadows, midtones, highlights, and whites. These zones span a range of 0 to 255 luminance points, with 0 representing pure black and 255 representing pure white. When your image exceeds this range from either side, it's called clipping, and it usually means you've lost important detail that may not be recoverable. Modern cameras have improved dynamic range, so they can handle clipping better, especially high-end cameras like Hasselblad's. But with entry-level gear, recovering data can be tough, so ideally you want to keep all your image data inside the histogram box. Let me show you what I mean. Watch the histogram while I slide the exposure to the left. It shifts to the darker end, I slide it to the right, and it brightens. If your histogram is mostly centered and contained within the box, that means your exposure is well balanced, giving you the best starting point for editing without losing details in the highlights or in the shadows. Quick heads up though, sometimes clipping is unavoidable, like when photographing light bulbs or candles or bright monitors. In those cases, it's normal for highlights to clip. Focus on preserving the shadows since they're harder to recover. Now, if you're using something like a Hasselblad, you might actually do the opposite. Preserve the highlights and underexpose the shadows, because the camera can recover shadows very well. But let's be honest, most of us don't have a Hasselblad. What if your histogram is bunched up in the middle? That usually means your image is flat, with low contrast. Increasing contrast will stretch the histogram across the range, giving you a more dynamic, visually appealing result. Keep in mind, histograms will look different depending on your creative intent. If you're shooting in a studio with a pure white background, the histogram will lean heavily to the right, and that's okay. Same with a black background. It will clip on the left. It all depends on your lighting and vision. Now let's jump into Capture One Pro. Inside the High Dynamic Range panel, you'll find sliders for highlights, shadows, whites, and blacks. You won't see a midtone slider directly, but the brightness sliders works smartly on the midtones without messing up your highlights or shadows. Watch what happens to the histogram when we adjust the whites. The far right end shifts. So now let's tweak the blacks and the left side moves. The shadows and highlights sliders are the most fun. They affect the midtone adjacent areas where most of your data lives, so small changes can have big impact. If you have a well-balanced image with rich color and contrast, you want your histogram filled with data from both ends. That's how you stop guessing in post and start editing with intention. Now let's go back to the camera. Turn on the histogram view and frame your shot. Make sure your data stays within the box. That way, you'll have the best space to work when editing later. If you're just getting started, I highly recommend using the histogram every time you shoot. It might feel a bit technical at first, but with time, it will become second nature, and your photos will improve right away, I promise you. And that's it for today. Let me know what you want to see next, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss the next one. See ya.